Hey everybody, we are at ng-conf. I'm talking to Sani Yusuf. I think I said that right.
Yep, perfect.
So we're here. We're interviewing the speakers. Now, have you already spoken, or are you speaking later in the conference?
So I've spoken once today, and I have another one tomorrow.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
busy guy.
very busy.
So what are you talking about?
You mean today or tomorrow?
Yes.
Today I spoke about 6 apps 1 code, which is basically how you can use Ionic and to have like a unified experience for development across mobile, web, and also desktop.
Oh, wow.
With Electron. And then tomorrow I'll be talking about reactive forms, and the title of my talk is "Put a Form on It." Shows you really the power of reactive form with some demos.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
So with Ionic, I'm kind of curious. You can actually build Ionic apps or Electron apps with Ionic?
Yes, Ionic is just sits on top of the HTML, CSS layer. So think of it as the same way you think of it as Bootstrap, but with a little bit more intelligence. Like it knows, it can detect its environment and kind of like morph to look. So if you were using it on iOS, it would morph and use iOS icons, iOS style looks.
Ah, gotcha.
If it was on Android, it would do the same. And then the hope is that and they're the same for the web, but you can also build Electron because Electron doesn't really care as well. Yep.
Right. Oh, very cool. So how do you go about doing that then?
So the way I showed today is the older way where we actually using like proper Electron and everything. But in the new version of Ionic, which is 4, something called capacitor has been created.
Okay.
Capacitors, think of capacitor the same way you think of, say, something like Cordova, like a slave in between the two technologies making the request for you. But
right.
Cordova, a capacitor now actually, what's it called? It encapsulates not just for mobile, but also web and what's it called? Something like Electron. So say you're using something like a dialog box. You say dialog.open. Now, if you're on a web application, that dialog.open is going to use the real JavaScript dialog. So it stays at home. If you're on iOS, it's going to use the real iOS dialog. If it's on Android, you use the iOS and Android one. If it's on Windows, it's going to use the Windows one. If it's on the Mac, it's going to use the Mac one. So you have to write that once and not worry about and just pass it this common agreed set of parameters. And yes, sometimes you might want to go beyond that and really dig nitty-gritty, but you can pass it these parameters and it will just figure it out for you and display the right thing.
Very cool.
I agree.
Yeah. So do you work for Ionic?
So no, I don't work for Ionic. I'm part of the Ionic community. I've been in the Ionic community pretty much from day one. Or there are different titles. Some people call me an ambassador. Some people will be. I work really closely with the team because my company Hybrid, which is a consultancy, we pretty much Ionic and Angular top down.
Okay.
And so a lot of the times you go around and you see some of these enterprise customers that don't really like something or like something, and then I quickly relay that to the team. So we almost like we work together in some capacity, like more open source collaborate capacity, but I don't work for Ionic as an employee or any sort of thing. Yes.
So my experience with Ionic is basically that I set up an Ionic project, and then it gives me mobile apps that I can play with. Right. So I have an iOS app, I have an Android app, and I have the tools installed on my Mac, so I can run them both. I mean, how do you get from there all the way to and here's Electron, and here's a progressive web app, and here are all the other things that Ionic is supposed to give you?
Yes, so that's a very good question, and the CLI is probably behind that. The CLI now supports Electron, Cordova apps, and as far as class systems. Then for the websites, of course, Ionic is not necessarily a web. They're not trying to be material design, but nothing stops you from using that. But also not just using that. Let's say you were using Angular, which is what the current version of Ionic is built in. Nothing stops you from creating a monorepo and adding another project in there that will share a lot of services and things like that, and a lot of maybe components and things like that. So you can definitely do that. And so that's how I like to, ideally what I would have is, I'd have this Ionic project, and then within that Ionic project, I will have, of course, all the Cordova stuff, but you also have like maybe on a different level, like an Electron and a web focus type of thing. And then you can because it's on the same directory, you can just share stuff. And
I gotcha.
They don't necessarily give you force you to a specific way to do that. No, they actually completely unopinionated, especially because the new version of Ionic is not built with Angular. So it's like, you know what? You can do it. Figure out however you want to do it. It's okay. It will work. That kind of thing. And that's why I like it. And so yeah, you would just come up with your own strategy. If you don't want to use a monorepo or things like that, you're never quite forced to leave that web. If you just want to use Ionic for what it's built, which is to create hybrid mobile applications, perfectly fine.
Right.
But I think my talk today was you can go further, and I showed that across 15 minutes that yes, you can go further.
So let's say then that I set it up so that I have the web repo and the web system, the Electron system, and the mobile systems. Do I have different build targets for those?
So with the Electron, that's actually part of the CLI.
Okay.
But with the mobile side, with the website, you don't necessarily need a website because what you're already building is web. You're already building web. So you'd have a different build target definitely for Electron because you're targeting desktop, and for iOS and Android. But you can also have another one for web. It will just it depends on how you want to do it. But how I would do it is I would just leverage a lot of what Ionic is already doing, which is doing AOT, building for me, because whatever I know that is on my, how do you say, my build folder is already a web application. So I would just push that to my server. Absolutely.
So can you convert an existing web application to be an Ionic app then?
Technically you can. Yes, there are commands that, because what makes an Ionic application is of course using the Ionic components. But even if you didn't, maybe you just wanted to use, like, say, some of the Ionic Pro stuff, it could just generate those Pro stuff for you. Would I recommend that? Probably not. I would say create a real Ionic application and then from scratch, and then maybe import some things and that kind of thing. Or maybe just,
that makes sense.
Hey, create an Ionic project and say, my project old. It's just file system. Just as long as you're referencing the right things, then you should be fine.
Yep. Yeah, you could also put common components into their own library and then import them that way.
100%.
Yep. That makes a ton of sense. So then I guess the other question that I have is, there are other systems out there besides Ionic to build mobile apps with Angular, right? There's NativeScript. I've even seen some people do some squirrely stuff with React Native to make it run Angular.
Yes. Yeah.
So, what's the difference there? What are you trading? So
I don't see anything as trade. I see just all of them as, one thing you never hear me say is this is better than that or that is better than this. And that's a narrative I hear a lot of people say. And I think that's a very, very short-sighted narrative. It's like saying, a sports car is better than a Formula One car. You can't drive a Formula One car on the road. It's for racing. But hey, in my opinion, actually, a space bus is better than any car because I come from a very large family, and that's the only practical car for me.
Right.
So the reason why a lot of people end up with that is you don't let they choose the technology instead of letting the user requirements determine what they pick. But in terms of comparisons, of course, there's sometimes you'd want to use things like NativeScript. NativeScript is a very great one, actually, and I co-run the community in London, even though I run the Ionic community. It's not a us versus them type of thing. It's more, Ionic is just web. It's focused. It's HTML5, it's CSS, it's JavaScript. NativeScript is completely different. It's running a JavaScript virtual engine, giving you access to native components, and absolutely. And there will be times when they have a great integration, great CLI. There'll be times when you want to do that. React Native. If you know how to use React a lot and you want to, learn once, right everywhere, perfect. And yes, so I don't see all of them as one versus, like, one is just going to come and take the place of everyone. No. There will always be people that want to use that. But with that said, when you bet on the web, you can only win because the web is where everything is going. That's true. And at some point, one thing I always say is, things like running native code and JavaScript virtual engines, they definitely have a definitive lifespan. Because one day, all we want is to one day write our code in HTML and not worry about Android. It would just, which is what PWAs are doing. So when you bet on that, and this is why PWAs, people like Ionic, are so happy, because it's like, we don't have to change any. This does not affect us in any way. Actually, we love this because this is what we advocate for. Right. Absolutely. So one other target that you haven't talked about that I'm a little bit curious about is like Apple TV. Can you build an Apple TV app in Ionic? Technically, yes, because I think you could probably target with Cordova and all the things like that. So nothing stops you from building an Apple TV application with Ionic. Ionic is just, remember, it's mostly focused about the look and the feel. But yes, Ionic is not, if Apple TV has a specific UI implementation, Ionic is not focusing on Apple TV. But but what I know is, but if Cordova runs on it, then you should technically be able to pull it off. If Ionic doesn't have, you can still use the goodness of Ionic and just say maybe create it's just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, your own implementation, and just tie into that.
Yep.
You could totally do that.
Cool. Now, did I do the sponsorship already?
No.
Okay. Let me take a minute and talk about our sponsor, Kendo UI. Kendo UI has visual elements that you can pull into all kinds of apps. I know you can put them in Ionic apps.
Absolutely. Kendo UI is a really, really great library, and I've used the old Kendo and now the new Kendo with Angular. That is really looking cool. And I mean, with the developer advocates they hired, Tyra and Alyssa. If Alyssa says it's cool and Tyra is saying it's cool, then that means it's probably really, really cool.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So they paid for the interviews. So now you get visual interviews with the speakers and visual elements in your apps. So anyway, go check them out. One of the things that I'm trying to do with these interviews is not just talk about, okay, this is what you talked about, but also just to talk about you for a minute. So a lot of people, they come from different backgrounds. They're interested in different things. You live in London. I've never actually been to London. I'd love to go. But so what's your life like outside of Ionic?
Well, outside of just doing a lot of Ionic stuff and traveling, I know I come across as very extroverted, but I'm actually a lover of simple things. I am very much a family guy. I don't have a family of my own in terms of my wife and a son or a daughter, but I like to stay in touch with my family, take care of my family. I like being that guy. I like water sports. I like paddleboarding.
There you go.
Yeah, I like paddleboarding. I like the simple thing. I like cinema. I like staying home. I'm actually very much of a stay at home, learn, and that's for me the most important. And just meeting people, saying hello to people, getting to know their story. And the funny thing, it's okay if I don't agree with whatever they're gonna spurge out. If there's okay if they're different, they're gonna say things that are foreign to me. But instead of that being a point of conflict, it should be a point of understanding. Like, hey, I'm gonna listen to you. You're gonna say a lot of cool things, and I'm not gonna agree to a lot of things, but you have every right to do that, and I like that, and I'm gonna learn a thing or two from what you're saying, because then it gives me a much better platform to understand somebody else that shares your view or shares your opinion. And I think this is a great thing, and I'm a big advocate of that. Yes.
Yeah. The other thing, just to kind of riff off that for a minute, I find that a lot of times if I go into things, especially the things that I get really passionate about, but still, if I just take a step back and say, what do they know that I don't?
Yes.
And then, sometimes it's going to be, actually, there's these things that I know that they don't.
Yes.
But in other cases, it's like, but then they're coming to the same, they're a reasonable person, so they're coming to a conclusion in a different way. Yeah. What am I missing?
Yes. I always say the biggest problem is whenever you go into our unfamiliar territory, coercion should not be your number one game.
Right.
Knowledge should be your number one game. Because let's say I walk into a room with a lot of these people that are using different technologies to me, and I'm just saying I want to leave this room making them feel like Angular is the best thing. No, I want to leave this room sharing what I know about Angular and learning what I know. If it really works for them, they would, and this works across all platforms, politically, religiously, everything. Coercion should never be your main point. It should be knowledge and understanding and learning. And when you do that, when you always take that, I want to go and learn and give. And it doesn't really matter whether the person takes or not, but I'm going to take and give and try to give as much as I can.
Right.
You'd be so surprised. Like they always say, there's a saying my dad always says, the best gospel is the silent one. If I'm telling you that, I like, what's it called? Like, I want you to say good morning to me every day, right? I can tell the kid on the road, always say good morning. They're not going to do that. But if I always say good morning every day, hi, how are you doing? And I do that, people around me are going to look and be like, hey, he always says good morning. I like that. I'm going to start doing that because it makes me feel good when he says good morning to me. But I never told you to say good morning. It's things like that. So it's the same way. If I'm always creating great applications with Angular in a specific way, I don't necessarily have to like convince you about it. At some point you'll be like, this guy's always delivering good products. How maybe we should check this Angular thing out. Things like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you said you're speaking tomorrow too?
Yes, I am.
And what are you speaking about tomorrow? It was reactive forms, right?
I am speaking about reactive. I have a 20-minute session about reactive forms called Put a Form on It. And it basically talks about just what reactive forms are, how it shows you terrible forms, then it shows you really, really, really good ways to use the reactive forms and some things. So it's sort of like this is what I try to abstract away from the reactive forms itself, but hey, these are great forms and these are terrible forms. How do you build great forms like this? This is what reactive forms allows you to do, things like that. And that's what I focus on tomorrow.
Very cool. Do you know what time that's at?
That's around 11. I have my schedule right here. So let me just quickly take a second to look at that. It's on at 11 a.m. till 11:20 at the Grand Ballroom.
Very cool. I know that some people are watching on the live stream. I'm hoping to get these up tonight. I've had some issues with my laptop, so I might not be able to. But if it goes up ahead of time, then people know that, yeah, that's a talk they want to watch.
Absolutely.
So what do terrible forms look like?
Well,
how do I know I have a problem?
If you have to remember that a form is a form, the form has failed.
Okay.
Do you know what the number one most used form in the world is? Take a guess.
Google?
Google search is the number one most profitable form. Forms can make or break your business.
Right.
And every day you tweet. What are you using? A form.
A form. It's true.
Facebook. What are you using? A form. WhatsApp. What are you using? A form. iMessage. What are you using? A form. We use forms more than we use any other type of component every day, but we don't realize because they work really well. You don't think of them as forms. But when I land on your website and I see I have to scroll 5 times and I haven't gotten to the end of the form, that's when I realize this is a form. And once I do that, that means I'm stressed.
Right.
It's not working for me. So bad forms have a lot of things, and I can give you some examples.
Right.
When your form is too long, that's not good.
Yeah.
Forms should have empathy. They should understand user. They should keep state. Your forms should know, and all those forms there are some forms that you haven't even started filling the information. It's already telling you what you're doing wrong. You know, it's like, oh, your password needs to be 8 characters long. I haven't even started typing my password. And so you should have empathy, and they should be aware. You know, if I have just finished typing an 8-character long password, I shouldn't be able to see the message as soon as something I've typed has fulfilled. So they should be aware. They should have awareness. But also, forms should be dynamic. They should also be very, very composable. And so there's a lot of things on bad forms. There's like bad validation errors. And you should always make sure your form is submitted once and once alone. If I'm doing something wrong, let me fix that before I send. The worst thing is sending me to the server and coming back and telling me no.
Right.
The only reason you should tell me if the server is broken, but you should never, I always say, try and make your front end and back end validation pass. Like back end validation should only be a formality.
Right.
The front end validation should be so strict that the back end validation should just be like, I'm just going to double check.
Right.
And then send the user. But they should be as close as possible.
Right. That makes a ton of sense. So how do you create that kind of an experience then?
So
is it you talked about the feedback mechanisms. Is there anything else you need to put on there?
So if you're using Angular with reactive forms, all that's built into you because they give you a lot of ways for you to be aware. So you can know when somebody has interacted with this form, when they're no longer interacting with it. You can also set validation rules that these are the rules I want for this particular form for you to be valid.
Right.
You can check when the form is changing. You can dynamically add and remove things because maybe you want to react to some server change.
Right.
You can do all of that, and reactive forms give you the power. But even if that's not enough and you want to now create your own form fields that you want to work with reactive forms, you can then do that. You can compose your own forms and still have them work with reactive forms.
Very cool.
Yes.
Now, is reactive forms a package that I can pull in for Angular? Or?
Yes, it's part of the Angular forms package. So there are 2 types of forms. You have the template forms, which I recommend people should just not use. That's just a personal opinion, not an Angular or Google recommendation. But reactive forms are the more powerful one, and I feel like the reactive forms can do everything the template forms can do, but much more. It's sort of like we get into like observables versus promises type of thing. And why should you use observables? Well, yes, promises are cool, but observables do way much more. So if you always use observables, you're just safe that if you do end up wanting to do way much more, you already have the capability. That's kind of how they work.
That makes sense.
Yes.
Cool. Well, I guess one last question is, how do people find you online? Do you tweet? Do you have a blog?
So I tweet a lot. Yes, I tweet a lot. I am Sani Yusuf, SaniYusuf, everywhere. You can Google that. You can go to saniyusuf.com. You can guess any email out there, and you probably still reach me. Twitter, Instagram. I'm a bit crazy on things like Instagram, the more personal stuff. So at your own risk. But Twitter is probably the best place to find me. And my blog, I should be writing a bit more. Yes, and I have some stuff on lynda.com and some books out there. But I should probably be doing a bit more stuff. But it's difficult with all the travel. But this is my 2018 goal. So hopefully you can just Google Sani Yusuf, SaniYusuf once again, and you'll find me online. Yes.
Good deal. And then as far as the meetups in London,
yes,
those are pretty easy to find. Meetup.com.
Absolutely. I run the Ionic UK meetup. I'm part of the organizers of the native script one, and I want to do a little bit more things about women tech and things like that. And yeah, Angular community, I'm always there. So if I'm always open to coming to speak at your community. Every time I'm in people's community, I tend to say hello. Like there's an Ionic Utah meetup tonight, and we do things like that. So feel free to just reach out, and we'd be more than happy to collaborate and do something.
All right, cool. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. But thank you for coming.
The pleasure is all mine, Charles. Thank you very, very much.
Yep.
All right.